everyone, good morning and welcome to Drishti IAS. Myself, I am Girish Venkatesh and you are joining me live on Drishti Learning app. And this is a live course for all of you. And this is for UGC-NET GRF Paper 2 Political Science. So a new morning, a new day and a new topic today. So we have a new topic today, and that is with regard to Unit 7. As we have started, we did start Unit 7 in the last class, and the Unit 7, it was about international relations, and we did have a discussion about international relations. आप सब ने अपना टास्क किया होगा जो मैंने आप लोगों सबको दिया था. That is, we had discussed with regard to the meaning, then the nature, the scope of international relations, और हम लोगों ने difference भी किया था international relations and international politics का. And I did say you that from any of the book which you have with regard to international relations, which you have been reading in your bachelor's and in your master's, you can go through that book and you can have a look at what all we did in the last class. And I did say you that today we are going to start with a new topic, that is, now we will jump into the approaches with regard to international relations. And the first approach which we are going to start with regard to international relations, it's realism. But before that, I would request every one of you that please take out your copies, please take out the pen and have a bottle of water in front of you so that you can sit, if you are joining me live or you would be watching the recorded version of this class, then all you have to do is that you have to watch it from the start to the end. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि आप लाइव ज्वाइन कर रहे हो या रिकॉर्डेड वर्जन ज्वाइन कर रहे हो और हाफ एन आवर के लिए किए, उसके बाद थोड़ा स्टॉप किए, फिर उठ के इधर उधर घूमे एंड फिर उसके बाद पढ़ने बैठ गए, फिर देखे, तो उसमें क्या होता है, एक रिदम टूट जाता है आपका. सो दैट विल बी ऑफ नो यूज ऑफ योर्स. अगर आप किसी भी क्लास को वॉच कर रहे हो, किसी भी क्लास को आप रिकॉर्डेड वर्जन उसका देख रहे हो, सुन रहे हो, then from the starting of the class till the end of the class, you should watch it and you should write each and everything which we are asking you to write it down. Okay, so let's start with realism. कल मैंने एक छोटा सा description दिया था with all the approaches which we are going to do, whether it is the realism approach, whether it is the idealism approach, or you can call it as the liberalism or social constructivism or feminism or Marxism. तो बहुत सारे approaches हैं जो international relations से related है जो हम लोगों ने इस क्लास में करना है. And we will be doing each and every of the approaches. So first of all, we are going to talk about realism. Okay. Now, when we are talking about realism, then the first thing which we have to discuss is a brief introduction with regard to realism. As we all know that the realistic approach, or you can say realism, its main focus is on competition. Its main focus is on conflict side of the international politics. That means realism as an approach, it focuses on the competitive and conflictual side of international politics. Realism, we can also say that it's also referred as political realism. And when we are talking about realism, then the entire approach of realism it's contrary, or you can say it's contrasted with that of idealism or liberalism, in which we can say that in idealism, instead of conflict, they talk about cooperation. They talk about spreading democracy. So, realistic approach or realism as an approach, it's contradictory, or you can say it's contrary with regard to the idealist approach. And when we talk about the realist approach, as I said you, that its focus is on conflicts. Its focus is on competition. That means here international relations is nothing else but it's with regard to becoming powerful. And this entire realism approach, it considers state the main actor. There are other actors also, but state is considered as the main actor. So we can say that the realistic approach, it's a state-centric approach. At this approach, its origin as a theory is in the 20th century. And we all know that the roots of realism, when we talk about the roots of realism, then the roots of realism, it can be traced back to Thucydides. And Thucydides, he talks about the Peloponnesian War, the Peloponnesian War between, and this war was, it was between the Sparta and Athens, the two ancient cities of Greece. And we all know that this war, the Spartans, they won, they defeated Athens, and they became the most powerful, you can say, city of Greece. So when we talk about realism, its roots can be traced back to Thucydides. And also, when we are talking about realism, we should know that the realist thinkers who had the biggest impact with regard to international relations, it's Morgenthau. And Morgenthau's one of the famous books is Politics Amongst Nations. And apart from Morgenthau, the other realist thinkers are like E.H. Carr, or you can say it's Niebuhr and all. So introduction आपको realism का थोड़ा सा लिखना पड़ेगा. आप लोग please अपने copies निकाल लीजिए. So you can write the introduction. That means whenever you go with the realist approach, you should know these introductory things about it. First one, you can say realism stresses on it stresses on competitive and please write it down. It stresses on competitive and conflictual side of international relations. Second, we can say it's also called political realism. इसको पॉलिटिकल रियलिज्म भी कहा जाता है. Realism is contrary to idealism, or you can say liberalism. Realism जो है, it's contrary to idealism or liberalism, which emphasizes on cooperation rather than conflict. In realism, state is considered the most important state. It's considered as the most important actor in the most important actor in the international arena. स्टेट को मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एक्टर बोला गया है इंटरनेशनल एरेना में. एंड वी कैन से दैट origin of realism is in 20th century, and its roots, मतलब जो roots है, and roots of realism can be traced back to Thucydides. Can be traced back to Thucydides. ठीक है, it can be traced back to Thucydides. जो कि हम लोग बोल सकते हैं कि द पेलोपोनेशियन वॉर, ठीक है, बिटवीन स्पार्टा एंड एथेंस. एंड रिजल्ट क्या था? स्पार्टा was victorious. और ये जो पेलोपोनेशियन वॉर था, it was 431 to 405 BCE. ठीक है, got it? So here the introductory part here, realism, it stresses more on the competitive and conflictual. Conflictual means what? Conflict. Competitive means what? Competition. That means the states, they are competing, and they're competing for what? They're competing for power. Because everyone wants to become powerful. That is what is their national interest. So they are competing, and when they are competing, then there is conflict. तो वही वो बोल रहा है. And इसको political realism is also called it as. And realism, it's contrary to what? Idealism. And it emphasizes on cooperation rather than conflict. Then in realism, state is considered most important actor. That means it's a state-centric approach. You can say that it's a state-centric approach. Other actors of the state, they are not considered important. All what is important is the state. Plus, we can say that the origin of realism, it's in the 20th century, and even the roots of realism, it can be traced back to Thucydides, ठीक है, Thucydides जिसको बोलते हैं, और ये Peloponnesian War था, Peloponnesian War, sorry, it's Peloponnesian War, and this war was between Sparta and Athens, and in this war, the power, it shifted from, it shifted to Sparta from Athens. Or ancient Greece में Sparta and Athens, they were considered as the two most important cities. So after this war, the Sparta, they got the power and they became the most powerful kingdom or most powerful city of Greece. ठीक है? Then we can say that when we talk about realism, then the most important realist thinker, जब हम realism की बात करते हैं तो सबसे important जो realist thinker है, जिनका सबसे ज़्यादा impact हुआ, it's Hans J. Morgenthau. Hans J. Morgenthau. It's G-E-N. Write it down. It's Hans J. Morgenthau. And Hans J. Morgenthau, in his book, what is the name of the book? The name of the book is Politics Amongst Nations. वो जो 6 principles है जो Morgenthau का we will be talking about later, it's in this book only. And other thinkers, other realist thinkers, you can say it's E.H. Carr, C-A-R-R. Reinhold ये रियलिस्ट थिंकर है जिनके बारे में यू शुड ऑल नो. ठीक है, प्लीज राइट इट डाउन. ठीक है, अब कुछ हम लोग यहाँ पे स्कॉलर्स एंड देयर वर्क्स की बात करेंगे. ठीक है, स्कॉलर्स, रियलिस्ट स्कॉलर्स and their works. This is very important. Please, you should all write it down. realist scholars and their works. सबसे पहले we'll be talking about Raymond Aron. Raymond Aron. Now, Raymond Aron was a realist thinker. The first book which he wrote was The Century of Total Wars. Of Total War. The Century of Total War. और ये था 1954. Write it down. The Century of Total War, 1954. Then 1 year later, he wrote it, The Opium of the Intellectuals. The Opium of the Intellectuals, 1955. Opium of the Intellectuals. Then 6 years later, The Dawn of International History, 1961. The Dawn of International History, 1961. ठीक है, रेमंड एरॉन का ये सब है. Then E.H. Carr. E.H. Carr. His book is 20 Years Crisis. Years Crisis. और ये 20 Years Crisis जो था 1939 में था. And then he wrote The New Society, 1951. Yesterday I did say you something about chronological order and match the following. इसमें ये books and their authors and their years, they are very, very important. So you people, you have to write it out. ये books, ये author और उनके. ठीक है. Then Hans J. Morgenthau. Now, Hans J. Morgenthau, as I said you, he had a great impact on international relations. So, the first book in 1947 he wrote, that is Scientific Management versus Power Politics. Scientific Man versus Power Politics, 1947. Versus Power Politics, 1947. ठीक है. ये E.H. Carr का. Then 1 year later, he wrote this book, Politics Among Nations. Politics Among Nations, 1948. Write it down. Politics Among Nations, 1948. Then Politics in the 20th Century, Politics in the 20th Century, 1948. Write it down. Then one more book he wrote in 1951, The Defense of the National Interest. The Defense of the National Interest, 1951. The Defense of the National Interest, 1951. And in 1960, he wrote The Purpose of American Politics. So this is Morgenthau. He is writing Scientific Man versus Power Politics, 1947, Politics Among Nations, 1948, Politics in the 20th Century, 1948, The Defense of National Interest, 1951, and The Purpose of American Politics, 1960. Write it down, please. Okay, so according to me, there were more others also, but looking at the importance of the authors and their work, E.H. Carr, Morgenthau, and Raymond Aron, you should know these. Okay? Now, let's go with the assumptions of realism. अगर realism को समझना है तो सबसे पहले realism के assumptions को समझना जरूरी है. Realism as an approach के assumptions को. And it's very easy. जो मैंने अभी आपसे introductory वो किया, discussion किया, उसी में बहुत सारे assumptions included हैं. Now, one of the assumptions is, as I said you, that realist approach, it's state-centric. And when I say state-centric, then in realism, state is considered to be the primary actor in the international system. That means there are other state actors also, like there are individuals, there are organizations in the state, but their power is what? Limited. And which is the primary actor in the international system? It is the state. So the first assumption with regard to international relations, I can say, if I say, assumptions of realism. तो फर्स्ट assumption क्या है? State is the primary, states are the primary actors of the international system. ठीक है, states are the primary actors of the international system, that is other bodies do exist like individual and organizations, but their power is limited. ठीक है, सबसे पहला assumption आपको समझ में आ गया. The header is in blue color and whatever short description I could give you, that is in the red color. Second assumption is very important. It says that in realism, the international relations, it's anarchic in character. Anarchic in the sense there is no central authority. There is no world government which is there to manage or to put in order the international relations among the sovereign states. समझ में आया? Anarchic means what? Lawlessness. Lawlessness कब होता है? Lawlessness तब होता है when there is no central authority. So realism believes that, the assumption is that international relations is anarchic in character. That is, there is no central authority, there is no world government which can manage or which can put in order the international relations among various sovereign states. अगर कोई central authority होता, अगर कोई world government होता, तो वो तुम्हारा सारे सोवरेन स्टेट्स को मैनेज कर सकता था, पुट इन ऑर्डर कर सकता था. सो द सेकेंड assumption is, write it down, international relation is anarchic, ANARCHIC, anarchic in character. ठीक है, इट्स एनार्किक इन कैरेक्टर. अब इसको थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं. एनार्की मीन्स देयर इज नो सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी और no world government to manage or to put in order, to manage or to put in order the international relations among the sovereign states. ठीक है, मतलब यहां पे एनार्की का मतलब क्या है? नो सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी, नो वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट. ठीक है, नो सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी, नो वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट. और यहां पे अदर बॉडीज डू एग्जिस्ट बट देयर पावर इज व्हाट? लिमिटेड. ठीक है, सो द सेकेंड assumption is what? The second assumption, you can say that there is no central government, there is no world government As a result, there is no one to manage or put in order the international relations among sovereign states. So, we can say, further isko thoda sa explain karo. So, we can say there is a sense of insecurity. There is a sense of what? There is a sense of insecurity among the sovereign states. And because of this sense of insecurity, they are willing to accumulate more and more power so as to become what? Secure. समझ में आया? क्यों पावर हंग्री होते हैं? ठीक है? क्यों? Why these sovereign states are power hungry? Because there is no world government. So there is a sense of insecurity. तो इसमें further आप इसको लिख सकते हो कि so the states have a sense of the states develop a sense of insecurity. As a result, they try to accumulate more and more power. So they tend to accumulate more and more power so as to become secure. ठीक है? So as to become what? Secure. ठीक है? Clear है? So there is a sense of what? Insecurity. So they try to accumulate more and more power. तो जिसके कारण तुम्हारा all the states they become what? Power hungry. ठीक है? Clear? लिख लो ये दोनों points. ठीक है? Third point we can say with regard to the assumption, I said you there is what? They want to accumulate power. So when they want to accumulate power, then between the sovereign states, there will be what? There will be conflict. So we can say that realist approach, the international politics is the domain of what? Conflict. That means third assumption is international politics is the domain of conflicts. International politics is the domain, is a domain of politics. Is a domain of conflict. Sorry. तो इसमें हम बोल सकते हैं कि there is conflict between or among the sovereign states ठीक है, there is conflict between or among the sovereign states. So the core of international relations is the core of international relations is conflictual interaction. Conflictual interaction among the sovereign states. देखो, their main objective was what? Yesterday I said you. Their main objective was power. But to achieve that objective, the means is what? It's conflict. So through conflict, each and every sovereign state, they are trying to become more powerful. ठीक है? So जो international relations है, it's dominated by what? It's dominated by conflictual interactions. मतलब there are interactions, but वो cooperative interaction नहीं है, as in liberalism or idealism. Rather, it's what? Conflictual interaction. यहाँ पे interactions जो हो रहे हैं वो conflict based है. ठीक है? Then one more assumption is with regard to the states. States in international politics as sovereign, rational, and unitary. States in international politics as sovereign, rational, and unitary actors. Matlab, the states are sovereign. That means the states are free, independent to decide their own fate. They are free to take their own decisions. Plus, they are rational. का मतलब ये है कि these states, they very well know their national interest. कि what is good for them, what is bad for them, they all very well know it. So we can say that the actors, that is the primary actor, which is the state, it's sovereign, it's unitary, and it's a rational actor. तो रियलिज्म में जो स्टेट प्राइमरी है, प्राइमरी एक्टर है, वो सोवरेन है, वो रैशनल है, और वो तुम्हारा यूनिटरी एक्टर है. यूनिटरी मींस it is the only one which is important. Other actors are not important. Like the individual organizations and all, they are not important in that state. It is only the state which is important. That's why I said unitary. ठीक है? So that is what is the fourth assumption with regard to realism. Fifth assumption is about human beings. In realist approach, the human beings, they are considered as egoistic. They are considered as what? Egoistic. Why egoistic? Because for them, their self-interest is more important. Their self-appetite is more important. ठीक है? Plus they have a desire for power. That means they have a hunger. भूख है उनको पावर के लिए. तो यहां पे fifth I can say human beings are egoistic and desire for power. Human beings जो हैं, they are egoistic and desire for power. ठीक है? That means हम ये बोल सकते हैं कि the selfishness appetite for power, the selfishness comma appetite for power and inability to trust others. मतलब ह्यूमन बींग्स जो हैं वो दूसरों को ट्रस्ट नहीं करते हैं, एंड द इनएबिलिटी टू ट्रस्ट अदर्स लीड्स टू आउटकम्स लाइक वॉर. वॉर जैसे आउटकम्स को ये लीड करता है. Got it? So human beings, they are seen as what? Egoistic. Selfishness है उनके अंदर, खुद के बारे में सोचते हैं. They do not trust others. They have an appetite for power. Appetite means they have a desire, they have a hunger for power. As a result, there are outcomes like what? War. Compete करते रहते हैं ना एक दूसरे से. They compete. Then when they compete, because there is an appetite for power leads to what? It leads to competition. And that competition, that selfishness, that egoism, it all leads to outcomes like what? War. तो यहां पे war जैसा outcome आता है. ठीक है, फिफ्थ लिख लिए. Then the sixth assumption with regard to realism is national interest is the basis of international relation. National interest. That means for each sovereign state, the interaction with other states is only to seek, promote as well as guarantee its own interest. मतलब एक सोवरेन स्टेट जब दूसरे सोवरेन स्टेट से इंटरैक्ट कर रहा है तो उसका बेसिक पर्पस ऑफ इंटरैक्शन इज नथिंग एल्स बट टू सीक, टू गारंटी एंड टू प्रमोट इट्स ओन इंटरेस्ट, अपना नेशनल इंटरेस्ट. That is what is important. लिख लो आप, फिर मैं लिखता हूं. So the sixth assumption is national interest. National interest as the basis of IR. National interest as the basis of IR. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ कि in its interaction with other states, each state, मतलब in its interactions with other state, each state seeks to promote, guarantee each state seeks to promote and guarantee ठीक है। इन शॉर्ट मैंने आपको बता दिया, ठीक है। मतलब हर स्टेट जो भी इंटरैक्शन कर रहा है, मतलब अ स्टेट इन इट्स अ सोवरेन स्टेट, इसको ऐसे लिख लो, वन सोवरेन स्टेट in its interaction with other states, ठीक है, each state seeks to promote, guarantee its own interest. वो अपने इंटरेस्ट पे ही सबसे ज्यादा वो करता है. So we can say that what is the primary goal of the state? The primary goal of the state is what? National interest, national security, survival and expansion of power. तो हम इसमें बोल सकते हैं कि seventh, the primary goal of a state is national security, survival and expansion of power. ये प्राइमरी गोल है. ठीक है, और ये पता रहना चाहिए कि इन ऑर्डर टू ensure national security, each state tries to accumulate more and more power to be secure. और अगर सिक्योर रहेगा तो वो तुम्हारा सरवाइव भी करेगा. ठीक है, गॉट इट. सो दिस इज व्हाट इज, यू कैन से, द assumptions with regard to realism. First assumption, I said you, states are the primary actors of international politics or international relations. State जो है वो primary actors है. That means there are other bodies. The other bodies do exist, like the individuals and the organizations, but their matlab, you can say the power is what? Limited. Second, I said that international relation is anarchic in character. Anarchic here means there is no central power, there is no world government which is there to manage, to put in order the international relations among the different states. So as a result, every state, ठीक है, they are in a sense of what? Insecurity. Why? Because they do not trust the others. So there is a sense of insecurity. So what they do, they try to accumulate more and more power so that they can be secure. It's second assumption. Third assumption was that international politics is a domain of conflict. International politics is a domain of conflict. Is a domain of conflict means the interactions which are there between the states or among the states, it's conflictual interactions. मतलब ये जो interactions है, ये conflictual interactions है. Why? Because every state, देखो सब points एक दूसरे से interrelated है. Now every state is what? For it, its national interest, its national security is more important. So as a result, they are in conflict with each other because they are power hungry states. उनको लगता है पावर है तो सिक्योरिटी है, सिक्योरिटी है तो सर्वाइवल है. So they see it in that way. So that's why we can say that international politics is a domain of conflicts. This is the second point. The third point I said you, that the state is what? The state is sovereign. The state as an actor, as a primary actor, it's sovereign, it's unitary as well as rational. मतलब जो भी states है इस international relations में, all the states, they are sovereign, they are independent. That means they can take their own decisions. So when they are sovereign, they are unitary. Unitary means state is supreme, no other actor is important. And last, it's rational. That means it knows what is good and bad for it. But on the other hand, the next assumption talks about the human beings who are egoistic. The human beings who are, you can say, who have a desire for power. So we can say that the selfishness, appetite for power and inability to trust others leads to the outcome of what? Wars. क्योंकि स्टेट को तो ह्यूमन बींग्स ही तो चला रहे हैं ना. स्टेट को चला कौन रहा है? ह्यूमन बींग्स ही तो चला रहे हैं. And these human beings are what? They are egoistic. They have a desire for power. They do not trust others. As a result, they try to accumulate more and more power. The national interest is the basis of international relations. That means whatever interactions are taking place between the sovereign states, that means one sovereign state, when it interacts with the other sovereign state, it always interacts keeping in mind that its self-interest or its national interest is scattered. That means each state, they try to seek, promote, ठीक है, seek, promote and guarantee its own interest. And the last one is the primary goal of the state is national security. So to ensure national security, the state tries to accumulate more and more power. ये आपका, what to say, this is what is the assumption with regard to realism. अब इसके बाद I'll be discussing about a very important fact जिसको हम बोल सकते हैं the main tenets of realism. ये कभी कभी आ जाता है, what are the 3S of realism? ये जो 3S है, ये जो 3S है, ये 3S जो है ये प्रिंसिपल्स है रियलिज्म का और मेन टेनेंट्स है. One of the S is statism. Statism का मतलब state is the main actor. The second one is survival. And the third one is self-help. चलो ये लिख लिया सबने. Let's go move on. Next part. ठीक है. So now we'll move into the main tenets of realism. You can write it down. Main tenets of realism. And when I say main tenets of realism, this is also referred as 3S. This is also referred as 3S. इसको principles भी बोला जाता है. 3S. और इस 3S में एक S जो है वो statism है. It's statism. The next one is survival. And the third one is self-help. Third one, it's self-help. ठीक है. सो स्टेटिज्म, सर्वाइवल एंड सेल्फ हेल्प. चलो सबसे पहले स्टेटिज्म को पढ़ते समझते हैं. मुझे लगता है आप सबको आता भी है. सो इन रियलिज्म द फर्स्ट एस दैट इज स्टेटिज्म. व्हाट डज दैट मीन? हियर स्टेटिज्म मीन्स स्टेट. That is, state is considered as the main actor, and the state, it's considered as sovereign, it's considered as unitary, it's considered as what? Rational. And because there is anarchy, then each state, it competes with the other state for what? For power and security. So between the states, there is what? There is competition, there is conflict. That is what is statism. ठीक है, समझ में आ गया? And one very important character, मैंने जैसे बोला ना, state is sovereign, unitary as well as rational. तो जो state का sovereign character है, ये बोला जाता है इट्स अ डिस्टिंग्विशिंग कैरेक्टर ऑफ द स्टेट. तो यहां पे स्टेटिज्म में वी कैन से, यू कैन राइट हियर स्टेटिज्म में कि स्टेट इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट actor. State, it is the most important actor, distinguishing character of state is it is sovereign, unitary and rational. ठीक है. फिर दूसरा, among states there is competition and conflict. There is competition and conflict. ठीक है, among the states there is competition and conflict, that is competition and conflict for power and security. और लास्ट में हम बोल सकते हैं कॉन्फ्लिक्चुअल इंटरैक्शन बिट अमंग स्टेट्स. कोई नया चीज नहीं बताया, ऑल द थिंग्स वी हैव ऑलरेडी डिस्कस्ड. तो इसीलिए इसको 1S बोल दिया गया. दैट इज, ये जो पहला वाला S है, दिस इज द फर्स्ट S. ठीक है, and this first S, it's talking about what? It's talking about state, that is most important actor. इसका कैरेक्टर क्या है? कैरेक्टर इज सोवरेन, यूनिटरी एंड रैशनल. ये रैशनल है. sovereign, unitary and rational. Then among states there is what? Competition and conflict, that is for power and security. So there is conflictual interaction. ये तुम्हारा states का है. अब देखो, so we all know that there is anarchy. ठीक है, anarchic character है. That means there is no world government, there is no central power, there is lawlessness when it comes to international relations. So each state, their objective, their goal is what? Survival. Now because of anarchy, the goal of every state is what? Survival. So as a result, what happens? The goal, that is survival, it's only possible. That means what is the precondition for attaining the goal? As I said you, the goal is what? Survival. So, but what is the precondition for attaining that goal? The precondition for attaining that goal is nothing else but assuming more and more power, accumulating more and more power, and thereby assuring security. Then only survival can happen. So the precondition for survival is accumulation of power and assuring security. और इसी में तुम्हारा Waltz, Alexander Waltz, who's the father of structural realism, हमें सबको पता रहना चाहिए, father of structural realism. ठीक है, Waltz ने कहा था security, it is the primary interest of the state. Security जो है वो primary interest है state का. तो second point में survival में you can write it like this. As a result of anarchy, write it down, the goal of every state is survival. The goal of every state is what? Survival. The precondition for survival is accumulation of more and more power and assuring security. ठीक है. So what is the precondition? The precondition for attaining the goal is nothing else but increasing the power and assuring security. ठीक है. So survival is a goal, but to achieve that goal, you have to achieve the goal of what? Increasing power as well as security. मतलब मेरा कहने का मतलब ये है कि for every state, power and security is the goal, but survival it's the precondition. ठीक है. And last, we can say that security is the primary interest of the state. Security is the primary interest of the state. This was said by Waltz, who is regarded as the father of, you can say, structural realism. अगर ये पॉइंट को थोड़ा सा हम चेंज कर दे तो ये थोड़ा सा और सही लगेगा. Let me change it properly so that you can understand it in a very simple way. मैं थोड़ा सा इसको और easy format में लिख देता हूँ. It's, I want to say it here is that increasing power and assuring security, increasing power and assuring security is the goal of a state. ठीक है. मतलब हर स्टेट का गोल क्या है? पावर एंड सिक्योरिटी. ठीक है. सर्वाइवल and survival is precondition of this goal. मतलब अगर आपको पावर और सिक्योरिटी चाहिए, then you have to survive. ठीक है. क्लियर है. So this is the second C, S. And the third S, as I said you, it's self-help. Self-help, why? Because there is an absence of international, you can say, authority. There is no central authority. There is no international authority. So when there is an absence of international authority, then what happens? The states, they have to depend upon their own self-help. मतलब the states, they depend on self-help for security. क्योंकि कोई central authority नहीं है. तो यहाँ पे third वाला बात इसको ऐसे लिख लो. Write it this like this कि in the absence of, or you can say in the international system, there is the absence of a central authority. There is a absence of a central authority. To counter the use of force by one state against the other. So, मतलब कोई सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी नहीं है. So, the states have to depend on self-help for security. States को self help पे depend करना पड़ेगा for security. Now you can write it out. ठीक है, प्लीज राइट इट आउट. 3S मैंने आपको बता दिया. ठीक है. सो द मेन टेनेंट्स ऑफ रियलिज्म. देखो ये सेकेंड पॉइंट सर्वाइवल वाला थोड़ा सा समझने की बात है. ये सेकेंड पॉइंट में ये जो पॉइंट मैं कह रहा हूं, दिस पॉइंट, इसमें व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से इज दैट कि फॉर एवरी स्टेट द गोल इज व्हाट? सर्वाइवल. बट every state, they want to increase their power, they want to assure security. And to increase power and to assure security, survival is the precondition. ठीक है, सर्वाइवल इज द प्री कंडीशन. एंड उसी से रिलेटेड यहां पे नेक्स्ट बात आया कि सेल्फ हेल्प. व्हाई? बिकॉज देयर इज नो सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी. इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स में देयर इज नो सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी. सो व्हेन देयर इज नो सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी, हु विल काउंटर, हु विल स्टॉप one state from using power against the other? So the states, they finally depend on self-help for security. अपने सेल्फ हेल्प के लिए वो तुम्हारा सिक्योरिटी पे डिपेंड करते हैं. ठीक है जी, क्लियर? चलो, नाउ लेट्स टॉक अबाउट सम ऑफ द, हम बोल सकते हैं कि अब जो हम बेसिकली बात करना चाह रहे हैं कि वी ऑल नो दैट द realist approach in the international relations, it did emerge after 1930s. That means Second World War जब स्टार्ट हुआ, उसके बाद से ये तुम्हारा मतलब आफ्टर 1930s ग्रेट डिप्रेशन के बाद से ये तुम्हारा स्टार्ट हो गया. That means after the Great Depression, the concept of realism, it emerged. But we also know that the concept of realism, it's not that it did not have an ancient tradition. मैंने Thucydides का नाम बताया. So it's not that it's an approach with regard to the 20th century. There is a ancient tradition with regard to realism. And when I say ancient tradition, then I can say that we can see that the writings of realism in some of the important thinkers like Thucydides हो गया, our own Kautilya, it is Chanakya, Machiavelli, थॉमस हॉब्स, ये सब के बारे में हम लोग अभी थोड़ा सा डिस्कस करेंगे। ठीक है जी, ओके। सो लेट्स टॉक अबाउट, इसका हेडिंग आप दे सकते हो, थिंकर्स thinkers whose ideas reflected realism. Thinkers whose ideas reflected realism. The first thinker whose ideas reflected realism is Thucydides. ठीक है। Now, when I talk about Thucydides, then we can say that the theory of realism finds its roots in Thucydides, one of the famous, he wrote it like the history of, but one of his famous works, it's the history of Peloponnesian War. Now, in this history of Peloponnesian War, we all know that this was a war which was fought between, I did say you earlier also, that it was a war which was fought between the two ancient Greek states, that is Athens and Sparta, 431 से 405 BCE. And with this war, the power shifted from Athens to Sparta, and Sparta was the most powerful state in the region. So what is this particularly telling? This is telling that the main reason for war is fear. The main reason for war is what? Fear. Fear का मतलब क्या हो गया? लड़ाई क्यों हुआ? Because they wanted to protect themselves. Security was one of their fear. Survival was one of their fear. That's why the war took place. सिंपल सी बात यह है। ठीक है, सो इसमें आप लिख सकते हो, यू कैन राइट इट डाउन। तो साइडस में यू कैन राइट इट, द थ्योरी of realism finds its roots in the works of history of the Peloponnesian. ठीक है, मतलब the theory of realism find its roots in the works of Thucydides, that is Thucydides का one of the famous works था, that is the history of Peloponnesian War. ठीक है, ठीक है, and this is considered to be one of the origin of realism in international politics, international relations. Okay, so it is considered one of the origin of realism in international theory. ठीक है, सो मैं क्या बताना चाह रहा हूं आप लोगों को वो थोड़ा सा समझ लो. I did say that yes, it's a concept which came up after 1930s, but it has its ancient roots also. The ancient roots goes to Thucydides. कि Thucydides का एक work था, that is the history of Peloponnesian War. And in this history of Peloponnesian War, where he talks about the war, and at last he says that the main reason of war was fear. That was what was the main reason of war. Ki there was a fear between both the city-states. And both, they were fear with regard to their security, with regard to their survival and all. So as a result, there was a war, there was a conflict. And at last, we found that the power shifted to the Spartans. The Spartans became the powerful rulers. ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से हमने ये चीज को देखा. So we can say that the origin of realism in international theory, it goes back to Thucydides, where he talks about in his work, that is history of the Peloponnesian War. और ये जो हिस्ट्री ऑफ Peloponnesian War था, Peloponnesian War कब हुआ था? 431 से लेकर 405 BCE. So it's something with regard to that period of time. ठीक है. Second, I said you, it's with regard to our own person, that is Chanakya, or you call him as 𝐃𝐫𝐤𝐬. Chanakya or 𝐃𝐫𝐤𝐬. Okay. Now, when I say Chanakya or 𝐃𝐫𝐤𝐬, then we all know his famous book, and his famous book is that of what? Arthashastra. That is one of his famous works. Now, in that Arthashastra, we all know that Arthashastra is what? It is the science of polity. Now, in that Arthashastra, 𝐃𝐫𝐤𝐬 is talking about the main goal of the king. That means the king's main goal is to increase the power of his state. Plus, the king's main goal is to expand the state and also to destroy the enemy. Now, realism bhi to yahi baat kiya. Realism was what? Assuming power. Realism was what? Expanding territories. Survival, security. Yahi to realism tha. So here 𝐃𝐫𝐤𝐬 in his Arthashastra, when he talks about the main goal of the king, he says that the main goal of the king's main goal is nothing else but to increase the power of the state, to expand his empire, and also to destroy the enemies. और हम सबको पता है कि 𝐃𝐫𝐤𝐬, he also talked about state adopting policies. That means the state should adopt policies with which it will help the state for survival. That means the state should adopt policies that will help फॉर इट्स सर्वाइवल। इसका मतलब सर्वाइवल के लिए स्टेट क्या कर रहा है? इट इज टेकिंग सेल्फ हेल्प स्टेप्स। प्लस अगर आप कौटिल्य का इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस के बारे में बात करोगे, दैट मीन्स इन हिज बुक अर्थशास्त्र ही टॉक्स अबाउट द थ्योरी ऑफ मत्स्य न्याय। द थ्योरी ऑफ मत्स्य न्याय क्या था? द बिग फिश ईट्स अप द स्मॉल फिशेस। ठीक है, जो बड़ा मछली है वो तालाब के छोटे मछलियों को खा लेगा। सो दैट वॉज हिज थ्योरी ऑफ मत्स्य न्याय। ठीक है, इन द सेम वे ही टॉक्ड अबाउट द थ्योरी ऑफ मंडला, द सप्तांग थ्योरी। सप्तांग थ्योरी की भी बात उसने कहा। प्लस द डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ सर्वभूमा, दैट इज वर्ल्ड सोवरेन। सर्वभूमा, वर्ल्ड सोवरेन, एज वेल एज विजिगिषु का डॉक्ट्रिन था। तो ये सब चीज क्या बताता है? ये सब चीज कहीं ना कहीं यहां पे भी हम देखते हैं, कौटिल्य के भी राइटिंग्स में वी सी दैट देयर इज सर्टेन काइंड ऑफ, यू कैन से, रियलिस्ट अप्रोच। ठीक है, दैट मीन्स इन हिज बुक अर्थशास्त्र, in various chapters, Kautilya is dealing with the concept of international relations. फॉरेन पॉलिसी के बारे में बात किया है कि नहीं किया? ठीक है, तो ये सब क्या है? वही सब तुम्हारा ये है। तो हम बोल सकते हैं इसमें कि इन हिज बुक अर्थशास्त्र, Kautilya has wrote Kautilya has ठीक है। सो मैंने क्या लिखा है देख लो, पढ़ लो कि इन हिज बुक अर्थशास्त्र, Kautilya has dealt extensively with the concerns relating to international relations। मतलब कौटिल्य ने बहुत सारे ऐसे चैप्टर्स है जिसमें उन्होंने इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस से रिलेटेड तुम्हारा बात किया। ठीक है, एंड he says that the king's main goal is to, the king's main goal is to increase the power of the state, ठीक है, expand his empire and destroy his enemy। ये किंग का मेन गोल है। प्लस in his book he also talks about the state taking steps to, the state taking steps या द स्टेट्स the state adopting policies which will help it to survive. ठीक है, मतलब वो उन्होंने अपने बुक में ये भी बोला हुआ है कि द स्टेट हैज टू टेक सर्टेन स्टेप्स, सर्टेन पॉलिसीज सो दैट इट विल बी हेल्पफुल फॉर इट टू सर्वाइवल. और इसमें हम बोल सकते हैं मेन कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस इंक्लूड ठीक है, मेन कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस इंक्लूड, इसमें कौन कौन से कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस हैं? द डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ मत्स्य न्याय, ठीक है, द डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ और द थ्योरी ऑफ मत्स्य न्याय and its extension to international relations. फिर उसके बाद the सप्तांग theory of the state. सप्तांग theory of the state. ठीक है, फिर उसके बाद डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ सर्वभूमा, वर्ल्ड सोवरेन. दैट इज द डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ सर्वभूमा भी उन्होंने बात किया था. और हम बोल सकते हैं डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ विजिगिशु. विजिगिशु वाज द राजा. ठीक है, तो ये सब चीजों में हम कौटिल्य का भी देखते हैं. सो वी आर बेसिकली गोइंग इनटू द एंशिएंट ट्रेडिशन वेयर वी कैन फाइंड द facts with regard to or the mention of the realistic approach or realistic theories. Then we can talk about Machiavelli. We all know that Machiavelli का जो famous book है The Prince, ठीक है, Prince was his famous book, and he talks about war and he does not talk about peace. He says that war and not peace is the normal condition of world affairs. मैकियावेली ने भी अपने राइटिंग्स में ये चीज बोला है कि war and not peace is the natural condition of world affairs. And he writes about the wars which were taking place between the Italian city states, and he was also criticized of his theories which he had presented in the book The Prince. So Machiavelli के बारे में भी हम यहाँ पे बात कर सकते हैं. That is the third thinker जिनके बारे में हम बात कर सकते हैं, that is Machiavelli. Write it down, Machiavelli. ठीक है. So Machiavelli, he too said that war and not peace, war and not peace is a normal condition of world affairs. War, not peace, that is a normal condition of world affairs. And we can say that Machiavelli, he is considered as one of the most practical thinkers in Western political thought. One of the most practical thinkers, but still, he has also talked about the war that was taking place between the Italian city-states, and he has been criticized for whatever views he had presented in his work, the treatise that is the Prince. ठीक है, तो वो चीज भी है. तो इसके अलावा he wrote about the war between the Italian city-states. ठीक है, जो इटालियन सिटी स्टेट्स में वॉर चल रहा था उसके बारे में भी उन्होंने लिखा है. ठीक है, प्लस we can say he was criticized extensively for his views presented in his treatise of the Prince. अगर आप जब हम मैकियावेली करेंगे और मैकियावेली में जब हम उसके स्टेट क्राफ्ट और वो सब के बारे में जब हम पढ़ेंगे तो वी विल फाइंड दैट देयर इज ऑलवेज द मेंशन ऑफ वॉर. ठीक है, सो मैकियावेली too, he said that war, not peace, is the normal condition of world affairs. And he also wrote about the wars between Italian city-states. और जब हम कौटिल्य की बात करते हैं, then in his book Arthashastra, Kautilya has dealt about what? He has dealt about the concerns relating to international relations. That means he is talking about there are chapters which extensively deal with concerns relating to what? International relations. And we can also see that in Kautilya's Arthashastra, the king's main goal is what? Increase power of the state, expand his empire and destroy his what? Enemy. And he also, in his book, he talks about the state adopting policies which will help to survive. But it's not that abhi aaya, after 1930 only this realist approach came. But there were thinkers like Thucydides, there were thinkers like Kautilya, Machiavelli, and now we'll talk about Hobbes also, in whose writings we can see that there is the mention of realist approach. Yeah, there is the mention of war, there is the mention of accumulating power, there is the mention of conflicts, survival, security. ये सब का तुम्हारा मेंशन है और उन लोगों ने इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस के बारे में भी तुम्हारा वहां पे बात किया है अपने स्टाइल में, अपने तरीके से. So this realistic approach, if you want to find its root, you can find its root right from Thucydides and Kautilya. एंड इवन इंक्लूडिंग मैकियावेली, और लास्ट में हम बोल सकते हैं कि इट्स हॉब्स, थॉमस हॉब्स। थॉमस हॉब्स क्या बोलते हैं? थॉमस हॉब्स का व्यू पॉइंट्स ये था कि इट इज नॉट पॉसिबल टू एस्टैब्लिश वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट। Thomas Hobbes is saying that world government cannot be established. Why? Because the states, they will never give up their sovereignty. Realism mein states are what? Sovereign. So because the states, when they will never give their sovereignty, then how can the world government be formed? So he tells that it's impossible to establish Leviathan over Leviathan. मतलब इंटरनेशनल गवर्नमेंट नहीं फॉर्म कर सकते हो ओवर अ सोवरेन स्टेट। ठीक है, फर्दर हम बोल सकते हैं कि he also said that the people, they will not agree with the world government. Why? Because for them, their main concern is what? Their own state security. So they will not listen to the world government. ठीक है, तो हॉब्स में व्यूज में ये है कि नॉट पॉसिबल टू फॉर्म अ वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट as the states do not want to lose their sovereignty. Yeah, they do not want to lose their sovereign identity. ठीक है, so it's not possible to form, to establish. फॉर्म का मतलब यहां पे हो गया एस्टैब्लिश। ठीक है, इट्स नॉट पॉसिबल टू फॉर्म और एस्टैब्लिश अ वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट, बिकॉज द वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट कैसे फॉर्म होगा? स्टेट्स के द्वारा ही तो फॉर्म होगा। बट द स्टेट्स, दे विल नेवर गिव अप देयर सोवरेनिटी। तो जब स्टेट्स अपने सोवरेनिटी को गिव अप ही नहीं करेंगे तो वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट कैसे फॉर्म अप हो सकता है? ठीक है, प्लस वी कैन ऑल्सो से that the next thing he said that people will not agree with the world government. People will not agree with the world government because of their own concern, that is state security. ठीक है, that is state security. Then whatever theories he gave, we can say his theories are central to realism. That is, in his work, he talks about पॉलिटिक्स एंड गवर्नमेंट। मतलब उसके वर्क में उन्होंने in his work he talks about the significance of power and conflict in human relation and among states. और उनका वर्क जो था वो था Leviathan. So he says that a Leviathan cannot be established over Leviathan. तो यहां पे हॉब्स भी कहीं ना कहीं रियलिस्ट अप्रोच के बाद रियलिज्म को कहीं ना कहीं अपने थ्योरीज में दिखा रहे हैं. ठीक है. सो ही इज टेलिंग नॉट पॉसिबल टू एस्टैब्लिश वर्ल्ड गवर्नमेंट. क्यों पॉसिबल नहीं है? क्योंकि स्टेट्स विल नॉट लूज देयर सोवरेनिटी. People, they will not agree with the world government. Why? Because for them, their state security, that is very important. And we can say that he talks about the significance of power and conflicts in human relations and among states. और वो भी उनके वर्क में जिसको बोला जाता है his work, जो कि लीवियाथन है. ठीक है. So this we can say it's all with regard to, हम लोगों ने क्या क्या पढ़ा? Thinkers whose ideas reflected realism. It's Thucydides. I hope everything is clear to you. Thucydides. Then we talked about Kautilya या चाणक्य. ठीक है. Then we talked about Machiavelli, and then we talked about what? Thomas Hobbes. So these are the, you can say, ancient, or they are the thinkers in whose philosophies, in whose writings, which we do see the ideas of realism. So we cannot say that realism only came into practice, yeah, it only came into existence after 1930s. There is an ancient tradition with regard to realism also. अब अगर हम क्लासिकल रियलिस्ट की बात करें तो क्लासिकल रियलिस्ट में दो थिंकर्स बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. वन इज E.H. Carr and the other one is Hans J. Morgenthau. We all know that Morgenthau, he is regarded as the inventor of classical realism. और J.H. Carr का मैंने आपको किताब के नाम्स भी बताए थे. यहां पे कहां गया? You might have written, हाँ, this one. E.H. Carr, 20 Years Crisis. ठीक है, 1939. The New Society, 1951. तो ये सब चीज तुम्हारा यहाँ पे हम लोगों ने बात करना है. तो next class what we'll do is that we'll straight away go into the classical realism. Classical realism में we'll talk about Morgenthau. ठीक है, Hans J. Morgenthau. ठीक है, and Hans J. Morgenthau में we'll talk about the his principles, जो उन्होंने 6 principles दिया था, that we will talk about, and then further we'll go into the criticism and all with regard to that. ठीक है. So for today we have done the initial parts of realism. We have discussed each and every aspect with regard to realism. ठीक है. Hopefully you must have understood whatever we have discussed. You must have written whatever we have discussed. Anything else which you find that there is confusion with regard to? I don't feel कुछ ऐसा confusion था, क्योंकि हम लोगों ने assumptions को किया, उसी assumptions के basis पे हम लोगों ने आगे बातें की. The 3S, which is the principles of realism, that is important: self-help, survival and security. ठीक है, वो 3S statism, survival and self-help, वो ज़्यादा important है. Then we talked about the thinkers in whose ideas realism does exist. तो उसमें हम लोगों ने Thucydides की बात की है, कौटिल्य की बात की है, मैकियावेली की बात की है, और तुम्हारा थॉमस हॉब्स। थुसाइडस ने हिस्ट्री ऑफ फेलोपिनीजियन वॉर में बात किया, और अर्थशास्त्र is the book with regard to Kautilya. Machiavelli ka The Prince, there he talks about the conflicts that takes place between the Italian city-states. Then also we talk about the Leviathan, which is given by Thomas Hobbes, और थॉमस हॉब्स, और ये इन सब के थिंक के वर्क्स में हम ये देखते हैं कि कहीं ना कहीं रियलिज्म के मेंशन है। दैट मीन्स वॉर, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट, पावर, ये सब का तुम्हारा मेंशंस है। ठीक है, सो थैंक यू ऑल फॉर attending today's class, and thank you for being a part of Drishti IAS and being a part of this Drishti learning app. So do join me tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We'll proceed further with regard to Morgenthau. As I said you, we'll discuss about the 6 principles which Morgenthau gave with regard to classical liberalism. ठीक है, फिर उसके बाद लिबरलिज्म का सब पार्ट्स करेंगे, रियलिज्म का सब पार्ट्स, क्लासिकल है, न्यू रियलिज्म है, इस तरीके से। ठीक है, थैंक यू ऑल, हैव अ नाइस डे।